Hey everyone, how you going? I'm just down here at Blue Lake. It's just a small drive out of Rotorua in a very beautiful, peaceful spot. I was down here for a couple of days, just capturing different things. I was hoping for a nice sunset to cast over the lake, but it's not looking like we're going to get much of that today. It's quite a moody, gloomy weather. So I thought I'd do a quick video about the histogram and how I use it in my photography and why it's so important. So what is a histogram? It's basically an in-camera diagram, basically, that's showing you all of your data that's in the photo that you're trying to capture. So it's pretty vital that you use this to make sure that you're capturing all the data you want and that nothing's blowing out in it. So I always expose my shots for the highlights so that I can recover those in post-processing and nothing's blowing out. And also not the other range of it is the shadows, so I'm obviously not trying to go too dark there. Now it all comes down to the exposure triangle, which is shutter speed, ISO and the aperture that you're using. So it's a balance of getting those three things right in your scene in order to capture the best data possible, so that when you get back to post-processing, you've got much easier data to work with. So I'll jump onto the camera and show you a bit in camera exactly what I'm talking about. So you can see here, this is inside the camera. I don't have a tripod with me today, so I've just lent this on a bit of a rock here. Now you can see the histogram here is this little graph. So as you adjust your different settings, so if I put my f-stop really wide, you can see that those highlights are blowing out. So in the histogram, on the right side here is showing all your highlights, in the middle is your midtones, and on the left side is all your darks and shadows. So I always try and expose my shots so that none of the highlights are getting blown out. So if I slow down the shutter speed, you'll notice that those highlights there are getting extremely blown out to the point where you wouldn't even have a photo left. But as I work that shutter speed back, we're getting a nice balance there in the histogram. So depending on the type of shot or scene you're shooting, say you need a shot that's using f11 there in order to capture the depth of field. Forget the blurry image at the moment. This rock is a bit close for this, but if you were using f11, you'll see it a fourth of a second is going to be too slow and it's going to blow out those highlights. So if we set that on f11, what we're going to do is adjust our shutter speed. Now it's at 1/10 of a second, and that's showing a nice data range in the histogram. So that would be how we want to adjust it. Now with ISO, basically all my shots I try and achieve that at ISO 100 in order to have basically no digital noise in the shot. So keeping that in mind, it's basically down to your shutter speed and your aperture. So for that shot there, if we want to protect those highlights completely, have them inside the histogram like so, 1/6 of a second at f11 is going to capture you a good amount of data in that photo, and in post-processing it's going to make it a lot easier for you to get the job done and recover things you want and work with the shadows and highlights and midtones. Now, another example, if we were using a wide aperture, say let's go f5.6, so now you can see that that's blowing out some of the highlights there. So again, we adjust our shutter speed in order to bring those highlights back in. Now we're at 1/25 of a second, and that is achieving once again a nice histogram and a nice amount of data in that photo. So yeah, just a simple explanation. I'm not going to go too crazily in depth with it all, but those are the simple ways of using your histogram and using your exposure triangle in order to capture good data in your photo, so that when you go back to post-processing you can work with that and achieve a much more desirable capture. Now, this shot here, for example, it's nothing spectacular, it's all pretty flat looking, but just as an example, you can push info here and you can see in this photo that the histogram is in a good position for that image. There's no blowing out data, and even the highlights and everything at the top will be well recoverable in post-processing. So that is just a simple formula to capture your shots that you need. There's nothing worse than getting back to your computer and wanting to do some post-processing and all of your highlights are blowing out, or at the other end all of your darks and shadows are completely gone, and it's really difficult to work with images of that sort of data. So an important thing to know and to practice just when you're out in the field, just using those settings. Like I say, trying to, if you can, keeping that ISO at 100. If you're doing night photography and stuff, you generally have to bump that up quite a lot, but in the day, especially out in the open, you should get away with ISO 100 for most shots, and that'll keep it nice and clean. And then just experiment with the depth of field that you want, which is a whole nother thing on its own. I might talk about that in another video, but yeah, for this one it's just about that histogram and how you want to be collecting that correct data. Awesome guys, hope that was fairly understandable. Just trying to keep it simple and easy to follow. So hopefully that helps, and if you've got any questions or comments, feel free to chuck them down in the comment centre. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'm going to head south a little bit there to there's a green lake it's called, and see if I can, some of this sunset colour might come through. Not looking hopeful, but anyway, we'll try. Awesome, thanks guys.